Online participants, we're happy you can join us. We have 1 week left of this series with Geshe Thabkhe, although Geshe will resume. He plans to resume this text in December. And in the meantime, if you'd like to make an offering of gratitude for Geshe-la's precious teachings or Katrina's translations or the Abbey for hosting, you'll find information in the chat box on how you can do that. And please note the deadline for those offerings. And so we'll start with some prayers, and you'll find the link for those in the chat box.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, oneness gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, filled of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as the Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 这样去中国把钱别送来了吧？这搞啥？等住你个吃了没吧？等住你个吃了弄没吧？一了光别吃的能先到，连着没路可以东西那样样什么呢？去买能先到是吧？哦，等住你个是，我让就没路头把这去住把了带些，听见什么种。rāng lā sāmbla tāna niva yuñgē, hāko tūmgē, o tīndē kabdi lā sā rā. Dī tabi mīlū tī tēn sāmbu tī, shindu nē nye kāwa rē sā rā, tēn chū nye kāwa sā rā. Kārē sā nā tī kyū tī, kiawa tū tīkwa pāng, mīki chūgōng chūtī pāng, chīn sō pā rū chīmbā chūg lā chōng gō rā, mīlū kiawa chīn tōpa lā. Nī kyū tī lā chōng bā kāwa ngā rā sōng zā, nī drebu tī tōpa kāwa chī kio rā. Tenjo nye kaas, se la long me baas, se tanda milu top che te yo te nye kaawe milu tsa chimbo te top yo te, ina ko shida de long ke yo mara, keji gen zogi nyi ku nanda, do nanda, te nanda, karche na, ko tsu zogi che ma zob che keji chige te ke yo mara. Se la long me baas, shida tusu yo mara se ra, tenjo nye ka se la long me baas. Yila kumbe tse de nang shen doos. O ti du. Tenju de nyi kawa samna. Kende tagas deg mar, mezi chola tang mar. Kugab yabu chi yu sam, ti tunda deba che ku yu samna. Nyi ka samna. Tunda meba, tisi chola tang mar. Nyi ka samna, temin dawa pansira. Tenju nyi ka as. Tenju chewa samna, temin dawa pansira. Nika sana kinar dyuta mes, taas teg mara, tuzi chola dama. Tenju nika tsila lome, tenju nika tsila lome ba. O ti tsila lome ba si ti samlutandu chiwa meda bada samlutangura. A tso dwa yin tendu tengi me sam ti samlukogura. Ti shena ke kugi o ma ti ngunera. Zabuli mi sangma yungi shera. Saba yungi nyingba dugi shera ma to kutenge o mara. Shida tuji yo ma re sigara. O ti di kar sigara. Se tanda tuji yo bate chola ma tanga se tanda denpa chi sigara. Tenju niga tsila long me ba yila kumbe tsendi nang shedo. Tsendi chigbu tanda la samlo tanga samlo shuk chimpu shinja shuk chimpu den do nugu yore. Pe tengen reji na ta pe tezi chawara. Ti ma tu samlo tanga ke yo mar, pe te yo marwa. Pe te me tu zang ko kyo chima yore. Cho chima ye na yeba ke le na da ma le na da tanda ko cho di che na sen de le ya so rang ki ba ro nang mi ki ba shen da la cho me ba chin ni pen ba tu ba shi di che ne tu ge wa ra oh ya te ji la ma da so ya
So here, as the Master Jila Tsongkhapa has stated, by cultivating the mind that this human life is so hard to find, yet has no time to spare, preoccupations with this life will cease. By contemplating repeatedly the truth of karma and samsaric suffering, preoccupations with the next life will come to cease. So here, right now, we have this kind of precious human life, which is so difficult to find. It's something that is quite precious. We have all of the sort of freedom that we need to be able to practice the Dharma. We have all of the conducive conditions to be able to do so. We have the kind of intellect to be able to contemplate and think about the Dharma and actually do things for our future lives. And so when we contemplate this precious life that we have attained right now, it's so difficult to find because because the causes are difficult to accumulate. It is difficult to have practiced all of the kinds of necessary, like abandoning the 10 non-virtues, engaging in the opposite of those, the 10 virtuous actions, as well as doing things like being generous and practicing patience and joyous effort and so forth. All of those are necessary in order to attain such a precious human life as we have right now. But as this continues, yet it has no time to spare, as in with every single moment, this life is being used up moment to moment to moment. It's being exhausted, and we really don't have that much time. If we really think about how precious the life is that we have right now, we won't do sort of wasteful things, meaningless things, because we see that this is something that has a value to it, and we want to therefore use it for things that are meaningful. As Gelama Tsongkhapa says elsewhere, if we realize the great value of this life, we won't just sort of sit idly by. But if we consider as well that this is not something that remains forever, if it were the case that we were just here for all of time, then okay, we can just do whatever we'd like. But this isn't something that remains. Again, thinking about death and impermanence, this is something that is brought up not to scare people, but actually to face reality. It isn't the case that anyone gets to remain forever. This world is such that there are old people who are dying and new people who are coming in. We're sort of being replaced all of the time. There is this kind of cycle of life. And so there's no time to waste. We need to recognize that the thing we have right now is not going to remain forever. And so if we had this sort of, we have this idea that's a mistaken one, that we are going to be here for a long time. But when we think about it, we aren't going to be here for so long, and so our future lives matter. And by practicing in accordance with the Dharma, whether or not we know that there are future lives, have confidence in that, or doubt that in some way, this Dharma is going to make us more peaceful and happy right here in the present life as well.
Oh yeah. Then do ka so da. Then jo ni ga chela lo me ba yu la sam be chen de nang shen do se de chen de chi bu dun da chen de dun da ma chi se go ma ra. Le ga che wo ra. Oh ti na ka so da. Chen de nang shen do se chen de le shen ja chi bu che de chen de dun da le chen de zo ju na. Me chen de dun da je chi bu dun da le ya. Chi ma pen je chi sam lo ma da se. Ti dun da le me zi zo ju na ma ti de so yo ra. Tenzin chela yela ko be chen de nang shen na wa she chen bo shuk chen bo lo wa. Ngara de me zi za chen bo de me zi ko ra ke to go ni de ra. Kala sa ye che sum bu che te de ra. Tenzin zum ba che te zam je re ma do te le la ko ji ko ba shen da ke go ma ra. Ti tu go ra. O yin du ka so de. Tenzin chela lo me ba. Ti chi bu don da zo ma ju se ra. Ti chi bu don da zo ma ju kar che ura se ne. Chamba dang tsawa, shala tsawa pangba, shala penpa chuba, kondu chungru dang, ngaje chungru dang, chado chungru dang, yabu che nangmi dang, tsangma debu kibu che te tabshi chi sungyo wara. Ti indi ko tsende la tewe tabu tengi wara, tanda tsende la tewa che te, tanda rang kiba, shen kiba, rang dang rundi chingi tsangma debu che te tabshi tengi wara. Tsende la chamba tsawa, kondu ngaje, chado me, shala tsawa ma che, shala chini penpa chubna, Debu chenpo de kyawa chema yungu de taa sugura nami. Kyawa sangpo togure tewa kanga tene yungu de esugura. Tende memba cha chendi chikbu tanda de shiju menge samlu tane. Ene chik le kyunde mesu tikba yena kyawa ina langdo ke mena. Ene susu pongli chagyura. Chendi le miki basu, kyawa chema miki basu. Kyawa chema mena kasha ke melenge ina ya. Choye de saba duye da sangpo che chura. Ngaje chungju chado chungju shala tsawa pa na Kurang chwe mensu na chwe re dewa re te di dewa re dewa ra di kyong raya ke yo ma re chwe ti chwe na tsendi le tiki yungu re maung pa da yo ye na kipsang yungu ra me yo ye na di ke yo ma yo na nyanga rwa kage ma se te na ya ta di ma nta so
So here, as this verse says, the first half of it, by cultivating the mind that this human life is so hard to find, yet has no time to spare, preoccupations with this life will cease. So here it isn't saying that we shouldn't do anything for this life, related to this life, but the kind of preoccupation with this life alone, only thinking about the affairs of this life without considering what will happen once we go into future lives. So if we allow our lives lives to pass away, only concerned with the affairs of this life, getting lots of things and sort of sustaining ourselves alone, then really that's going to be a great waste. It's going to bring a great ruin about. So again, it's really the clinging, the wanting things for this life, like above and beyond. I mean, we need to have enough to eat. We need to have shelter. So having those kinds of things that are sustaining for us is necessary, but it's not wanting like more than that, not needing to have lots more affairs and things. And if we only concern ourselves with sort of feeding ourselves, clothing ourselves, sheltering ourselves, really we're not thinking about things beyond that. That's quite a waste. So instead, we should think about things like love and compassion, a mind of altruism, getting rid of our afflictive emotions, reducing our pride and our anger and our hatred and so forth. And these are the kinds of things that make this life happier for us. We enjoy this life more, and it's better for those around you as well. If we instead are sort of only concerned with the things of this life, we don't think about altruism or love or compassion, then again, it's not recognizing the great value of this. And so even if it is the case that we engage in this kind of practice of Dharma, we do things like we have love and compassion for others, we think about altruism, we reduce our afflictions, we get rid of our attachment and our anger and so forth, this will create more harmony and peace among those around us. But the great result will come in the future. And so we see that there are those who maybe don't when they're only concerned with the affairs of this life, they don't think about karma. They don't think at all about what it is that they should adopt and abandon. And that's really creates unhappiness for yourself and unhappiness for those around you to act in such a way. But there are those who, even though they might not accept future lives, they still see a value in the kind of a practice of taming the mind. And doing these kinds of practices that tame our mind really are going to have benefits here in this life, but also in the future. So the danger is if we don't act as though there are future lives, we don't think about Dharma at all and are just concerned with this life. Whereas even if someone might not be convinced of the presence of future lives, engaging in these kinds of practices will bring happiness now and in that future.
Oh yeah. Sila long me ba se de cho me da ba she yo ra. O de ke chen bu de ten tu ten ge me som sa shina ku yo ma de. De jirin ga ya bu che de se yo ra. Ngara zo le ga che ga re che long ba chil che. Tu ju shi da me na o ta ma tu ju shi da me se le ga de ta da chi ra. O de ne shi shi ju me ge le ga ma che se. Sila long cho me da ba se yo ra. O de ka dam be ke she lang ta me. Che delia da ming de la umare que chenda kansa chigi chechi na ro chi shibre chechi na ro chi o chechi chwa me da ba ya ne ha da som das xie yin ba de sam lu tong se chi nge be lo shi ye na sa ngo ne ten de chu le sam lu chung so na ne kera shen la che ti ba po la ka ju me ba si os ke wa tro la ka ju me ba si os o ta tikpa mesa sam tikpa paya ta kewa trubal ko kabe to ne che kale me chong gre chere te ten do chamba ta ni ji ya ya ko se sangma te ko gre sangma tungai te ko ra da chikpa re samsa sendi pame chombe sangma ya tinde samlu ta na chira simje to che bola ka ju me ba chong chere kale ka ke yo ma re chere kabe to ne mil pen to ya to kar chi na sigre sigara o te chilam ne de ya.
So where it says this life is difficult to find, but has no time to spare, this is really thinking about impermanence, death and impermanence, which again is not to elicit some kind of fear, but really to make us take advantage of the life that we have right now. Like if we know that we are traveling somewhere and we're only going to be there for a certain amount of time, then we're going to do the kind of work, the activities that we want to do within that time. We see, oh, I've only got this much time. And so too, when it comes to our life, recognizing that this isn't permanent, it's not going to last forever, we should use it for something that is meaningful, make it valuable, like take advantage of the value of this. And so there is a saying from one of the Kadam Geshes, wherein he was asked by someone, how should I practice? Like, what's your advice for going about practice? And so here he said, well, think again and again about death and impermanence. If you have gained certainty, like you know that you are certain to die. It's not difficult to abandon non-virtue and engage in virtue. When you have that real felt certainty, then you recognize this is something that won't last forever. It's not difficult to then take up the practice of abandoning non-virtue and engaging in virtue. And he continued saying, and in addition, train the mind in love and compassion for all sentient beings. And if you do so, it's not difficult to work for the benefit of others. If we have really trained our mind, come to see that all sentient beings just want to be happy and don't want to suffer, they are exactly the same as us in that way. And really, they're sort of like our kind mothers and fathers. When you have cultivated those sorts of minds, there's no difficulty working for the benefit of others.
Yeah. In this one. Lende melu kwe tunge nam yang samna chime na shendo sirwa. Le de melu sidita le kewa chi chena. Shan la tsawa pang pemba trube kewa chi cheba ina. Tin drebu kewa chi ma la dang me soba tewa chi gade sira. Oh, tini ya. Shan la tsawa tang. Oh, tende seba ni tikba saba ina. Kewa chi ma nge son ke chindila mi kiwa shima la tunge yungu de sira. Lende melu kwe tunge nam yang samna se. Legi shawachane koala kudusa kabri lala ke kabri mele ke kabri tandula ke ko kyo da me da la je dogora le da nyama mo ge kyo se la shin je de ko tunge je da shin che ma do yo mara o ti sam ta ore so ra le de me lo ko e dunge nam ya sam na se ko e dunge sa ma bu yo ra chi da nga jo mi ge mu sum to e de ke dunge ke be dunge na ge dunge se dunge ma bu do tezu kanga mile duwa tile lawa tungi mabu samta yora. Tezu yabo samna kawa kena ke meduwa sam hala kena mile kena ko lenye ji shawa sere ya tungi ji rangshin sere sam. Tinde samra. Kuwe tunga na yang sana chime na shada. Chime penja lada mi te wachi top kudu samsa tiye ko shenja de do du se tar kudu sam. Leda nyumba wagi kewan dolen cheba pumbu dolen cheba tile tendo tar kudu samsa 타벨로 지그래 에스와라 어들 렌데멜로 코에통이 하서나 치면은 되다 공배 어데 하서나 치면 나셔도 겨와치 말하다 미 겨와 톱질을 써고 대신자도 매버셔 그래서라 되다 공배 코에 편조라 이미 깨지자 매주시세 코알라 표성 써봐 내 표성 써봐 류 표성 써봐 라주 표성 써봐 써 가리나 대조리 현자지기 매라 말아도 딱 개치셔대 소수네 르 론주 니도라 소바 강가를 현자지교 말에 자와지야 요래 자와시도로 참바다 자와지 현자지교 말에 현자전에 내를 현자 숙시부세 어라 르르 현자 숙시부세나 근데 정갈람을 깔려요래 디강가 샤고도 삼테네 서바메게 샤그라 어디 당분에고 대주 강가 샤는 데에 삼니마치 대주 강가 소수 르엔제 샤고라 삼 대샤고네 대적대다 잘라다 제수 강가다 이하는 드레인 버리지라 대인섬 내내 섬을 땅토나 정말 배 친예배 시간을 레스나 당은 남주셔야지 섬을 땅에 내신 중으로 대점비 깔려 용마로 뒤치에 섬을 마다 이제 땐도 땡게 섬을 땅 니마주 합드 갈도서 때네 섬이야 배 티요라 강에 용거라 내서버 숙심부지요라 근데 매워치도 내내 고쳐지세 어때 연구를 삼땅도 lan게 와라 대전에 내 야가 연구도 대전 딜리 동지셔 땅고로 이제 어디래 그래서 거에 본절에 이미 깨지지 않게 계셔서 예전군도 타르왔던 일로스 대주나 예송그 동엘에 타르와서 많이 봐야 내가 녀모보 왕게 풍분 돌레잖아 ene tunge nyanggu ba tele tendu tarwa chi che gu sam ku phumbu tole che ne kyawala ya tele gyu yo ra namba sangye be gyu me debu yo mara gyu de kana debu de me yo ta cho ra o ti de tene tarwa to ba ya cha ku do kyawala tendu khwala tendu tarwa chi che gu sam teya ra chi bu ma yin ba ra ga chen de phame chombe semje thamje kyawala thongma me ba so da ene pada mada nyeda nyeju trobu da tromo karen jorju nan de jore de ma jore sam susu nyamdon rodi chinge to solia ngeba ke yo marwa kiji pe do ngosing marwa o ti de te zo sama tamje samutaje simje tamje ge pamba tup tunge Ranchi bu koale tungele tawa maiba. Simje tamje kyan koe tungele tarwa che tungenge. Kyan kunse yonde kunde. Yang yana sangbyo tarshimba. Shenyo tarshimba. Shirab langdur gene jibe shirab tarshimba. Kansa chidun gyurwa cha nyamne. Ane tanda kewa chunjunji cheba ina. Maho bona. Sanje kowan tobe gyurkyo chense. Chimba tamide chimba tarshimba. Sanje je kowan na. Sanje na shingyora shosirwa. Soba chikomna soba tarshimba. Sanje na shingi. Kyan kunse yonde kunde chingyora shosam. O te chido ane. Ngondo da ngele tube tabtembe gombo ludu genzebe umarin je chongwalia teba chigi sam te tene tele samlu tangi sa te chini nyamso lane tende tamje kembe koba toba chagi sam o chenyembe kono se tamne sember shuche ya digre to mo bucheta.
Mm. So, here, then it continues by saying that by contemplating repeatedly the truth of karma and samsaric suffering, preoccupations with the next life will come to cease. So here, contemplating the infallibility of karma, in that when we do a virtue, it's going to lead to a good result, and having certainty that when we do non-virtue, that leads to a suffering result, that by causing those kinds of actions that are harmful to others, that will create a suffering result. This is invariable. And so too, when we engage in virtue, it is going to lead to a good result. But here then it says by continuing to contemplate, or by contemplating repeatedly both that infallibility of karma and samsaric suffering. So here, thinking about the way in which we cycle in samsara without any control due to the force of our karma and afflictions, we take up a birth due to the force of karma and afflictions and cast off that birth, taking another one, cycling again and again. And so contemplating the various kinds of sufferings within samsara, not just in the lower realms, but also even if one is to be born as a human or as a god. I mean, there are those kinds of sufferings that we can directly see as human beings and witness in others, but there are many myriad types of sufferings that are not directly visible to us. And even if we are born in a kind of situation where it is considered to be better as a human, we can see there's the suffering of birth and aging, sickness and death. And even if one is born as a god, that too has the nature of suffering due to the fact that it is a life taken up due to the force of karma and the afflictions. And so contemplating this repeatedly, one comes to think, I need liberation from this. I needed to gain a definite kind of freedom from this cycle of repeatedly taking up and casting off aggregates due to the force of this kind of karma and the afflictions. And so here it is again, the preoccupations with the next life will come to cease, as in one will give rise to a feeling of wishing to become liberated. And following this, the next verse gets into when one doesn't have clinging even for a moment to the excellencies of samsara, then this is when one has generated a genuine wish for liberation. So here, when it comes to the kinds of excellent things within samsara, it isn't as though we can't enjoy them or sort of have an appreciation for them, but here it is that clinging to various things. When we cling to the excellencies of samsara, from our possessions to our abode to our body and so forth, this is a mistaken way of doing this. This is what needs to be overcome. We need to have a recognition that all of these things that we enjoy currently are really in the nature of being impermanent and won't last at all. So at the time of death, when it comes to our body, our possessions, our friends and relatives, our abode, we have to give up everything, even down to our body. And so let alone the things that we have around us, our possessions like our table and our books and all of those sorts of things. And if we have considered this possibility, we recognize that yes, actually I have to face that time when I will give up all of these samsaric possessions, everything that down to my body will be taken away or will be gone, then we won't have the same difficulty at the time of death facing that reality. Whereas if someone has never contemplated that they have to lose their possessions, their body, all of it, then that's going to create a great deal of stress, the kind of anxiety at the time of death. So from then having this point of view of contemplating the reality of samsara, the infallibility of karma, and also the nature of it, it, that every birth taken due to the force of karma and the afflictions is going to be in the nature of suffering. And so when you've gotten to the point of day and night, you really just want to get out of this, you have this wish for liberation, then the contemplation comes that, well, if I want to get out, I need to stop the cause of repeatedly taking birth in this way. As in Buddhism, we assert that everything has a cause, nothing is causeless. And so if you can stop the cause by generating the proper antidote, then you can stop this whole cycle of taking rebirth. But if we contemplate then that, well, it's not just me who's in this situation, but really every other sentient being with whom I have had closeness and a relationship of even being my mother and father. We have been taking rebirth since beginningless time, and there's no certainty about that. We can't look at one being and say, oh, I've never been friends with them or close with them, they've never acted as my mother, and so forth. When we switch one lifetime, we don't recognize that person that we previously had a relationship with. So here, when we recognize that all of these sentient beings who have shown us such great kindness are in this same position of repeatedly cycling within samsara, we can give rise to this kind of wish to be able to be of benefit to them as well. And the being that can be of greatest benefit is a Buddha who has really taken kindness, compassion to its culmination, as well as wisdom, who has removed all faults and developed all good qualities, and thereby has the ability to teach beings in accordance with their needs. And so when we have this kind of motivation, thinking that we wish to attain that state of Buddhahood, and that motivates our actions, then even a small virtue goes toward the cause of achieving that Buddhahood. Even if we just do a little practice of generosity, or we engage in patience, whatever it might be, it becomes the cause that leads to that result of gaining that state of Buddhahood, in which you have eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And so here we should give rise to this motivation, thinking that we are listening to those teachings by Nagarjuna on the precious Garland, particularly this first chapter on highest status and definite goodness, with the goal of being able to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So please set such a bodhicitta motivation for listening to these teachings.
Oh yeah. Oh, 당아주 솔로가 같이 교주된 봐. 저래. 지금 교주도서 뒤따셔야 그치 솔로같이.
Mm.
단데르다 가서라. 중앙 사주 멜론 중앙도서 참마 소소네 쇼라 랑신기 주바 요레스 중앙남 소소네 랑신기 주바 랑윈네 주바 요레스 대여자 중앙주 촉바데 랑신기 주바 요레스 뭐뭐마투즈 티삼기오라 이데 신하스고라 다디 중앙 소소와 랑윈네 요마레 중앙 촉바데 랑윈남 라와도 주바요 마레스 디셰요라 이칸데 시도스나 웬데 소소 랑요나 비신 메바라 메치메세 소소 랑와도 주바체 요바이나 아니 웬데 소소 랑요나서 랑윈네 주바요나 소라 비신 메바라 메치메세 아니 메다 비신이부터 고 랑와죠라 메데 샬라테 먹고서 랑와치네 요라 랑아체네 요네 피시메네 메용거베서 티 피신스도 비게 메 당오 치바체 바데서라 싱 첨부 동부텐들 메바나 마하베 사테라 싱데게 메심데도 어틸 피신시고라 군념도설 요라 동네 비진네 동네 가도 멤버사 그때 마부야 칭게 줘라 메당오 치바르치 땡게치도 배고 치고도 말데 냠도 예땡게치도 어딜 나 ane pyushin delia ane pyushin tishin di mena me kora ra loga te tuk duwe sigora ti te tuk marwa o ti sigora kete soso ra yo na pyushin me bar mechi de me de yo kuru yo tuk ruwa se me de kaka yontong bende pyushin le tenshin del kuku duwa sigora rawan tuk me duwa ko shenda rogwa teni nyamdo sheni me cha ku duwa o ti sigora pyushin me bar mechi me se ane 요단 토단 되고 다들 기버려 요단스는 롱들에서 요라 토단스는 토레 뒤가서 택바 사택바 싸워들에서 요라 택바 이래 토세리도 토단 뒤바스도 추들에서 요라 추루소 정게돼서 뒤바나 추단 롱단 메테시 슈다 롱다 요와 롱다와 멜라서부터 상마탐지데 소소랑게 요바 마르 콘진냠도 데버데 랑원에 요바 마르 세세거라 티네 찍라 마데바 코나 짱짱 랑게 투바 랑와도 코나 찍부 요토바 치코르 티요 마르 스우다 요 티슬라나
So here then, turning to the text, we're going to pick up with verse 86. This is actually a review just to sort of get where we are in the text. And so here, this is talking about the various elements. And here, the realists would assert that these elements exist by their own essence, like from their own side. And as well, the kind of collection of those then exists from its own side or with its own autonomy, whereas this is refuting that idea that these individually could exist from their own side or by their own power, and therefore, how could they exist as a sort of collection in that way either? So it reads, if each element exists on its own, then why wouldn't fire occur without fuel? So here, if we were to say that the elements existed by their own power, on their own, then how is it that we see that fire is dependent upon fuel? So here, this particular word fuel, I'm sure the definition could become more expansive, but when we have something that's like a stick or a log, and when it is engulfed in fire, it's almost like mixed together with that. That is then the support for fire. Or we could think about in a butter lamp or something, the wick, where it's actually, that's where it is burning. This is something that is like almost mixed together with the fire that is burning it. And so if each element exists on its own, then why wouldn't fire occur without fuel? We can see that although you might want to assert that these are inherently existent or existent by means of their own nature, it is the case that fire doesn't occur without fuel. So likewise, why wouldn't there be water, wind, and earth without coherence, motility, and hardness? And here I can see in the English we've sort of put them in the correct order to line up. But if it is the case that these exist in and of themselves in a way that is like self-sufficient, like set up on their own, then they wouldn't need their various, like for example, the fuel for fire or their various characteristics. Like you could have water in the absence of coherence, wind without motility, and earth without hardness.
Oh yeah. Oh, that they got so that they got so taking it good. Penanga kasi kansa shedu sa kibu sa me chuma ye me long me namga me namshe ma so do so sa shedu lu gi tabu chadela sa shedu sa yin jong a so ra rugo la so ba te so ta tabu cha chi ora ani chu shedu dan pe ta da chu she la so ba se so sa chu me shedu tre de le se do long shedu ya u ta ya de te de yora sa chu me long 남과신의 부가 남과 뜻이기도 디네시 행동 접시네 고강가 사드 차시 타보 차시어라 될 사시거라 아니 추서 중념도 행동도 정말 주루루 대야시어라 디 취지게어라 주면에 배 차와견견이 되되되 소소 가가가는 로로라 배어 추인종에서 사주 메스도 드래그 차시어라 고래 드래그 차시어라 사주메 이 롱제 pasu lungde dress kormado kote togo mara odi kilisigiora de mana chudabjina chunalia me joayora karasne lomadab da chishana ko rude treg chache yora kola chache ngora odi lisigior mado memba je yotil ko mara odi chilamna
So here we need to understand this. Like, for example, when we were talking about the person in the verse that came above, the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, not all of them together. What person is there other than these in verse 80? So here, when we were talking about the person, they are composed of these various elements. And we can think about the earth element within the person is all of those kinds of hard parts of the body, the bones and so forth, that part that has hardness, obstructiveness. And so too, the kind of, there's the liquid sort of element, the water element of the body that includes things like the blood and so forth, but also the cohesive factor, the kind of creating cohesion and staying together. And so too, the person has that heat element, fire element, in that they have that internal kind of heat as well. There is the wind element, the sort of movement throughout the body, the space element, those empty spaces that allow for those things to move and so forth, and consciousness. And so too, when we look at something that like a tree, it contains, with the exception of consciousness, all of these various elements. So for example, a tree, it has the kind of hardness. That earth element is part of a tree, but it also has all of those other elements in it. So without the water element, there wouldn't be that cohesiveness, the cohesion that comes together. All of the sort of individual particles would just scatter about. And so too, when we have the heat factor, that's like the heat within that tree. The wind is the motility element of how things move about within that. And so too, we have the Oh, sorry, that's all of our elements. So when it comes to even something like a tree that contains all four of those elements. So here it's not saying like when something is burning, it has water in it, but this kind of each of the elements existing within the other three, this is what it is referring to.
Oh, yeah, this was. That is it. Oh, no, oh, this is that is your at the young. Mamma to Utuka. Teddy, Mekona, Metin Jiden Yondara Jireko, Chick Barechi, that Chick Mana by Marisam Gora. Jina Chala Chemepana Chikudako. Shanda Chikudos, Pishinashishi. Teach and let you to Usigara. In a Shanda long that has all come out as a Tirawan to a Ramuna to a Yores, and Medici Bunjitangi Tragwongi, Charlatan to Gidos, Shanda somewhat wrong with the Trugre, Rawan to Trugres, Shigara, Shena Sigara, or Dendamaris or what. Did get a mekona. Rồi sinh mẹ bà mình chú ở trên chữ đến là trạc về tôi vậy chữ đến trạc về hoàng thì tôi xin là điều đấy sẽ ra sáng sớm sẽ đã chú ta mẹ ta luôn là sao có thể số ra sáng sớm này tôi mẹ tôi ra cái ngồi ở đó số sa sa yên chung chú mẹ luôn là sao ba mẹ mà luôn là sao ba sum bút đấy và thế sẽ là tôi này này ở đây số ra rang cái ngồi ở đó xin là số và sẽ là mà tôi ba rang ngồi ở đó xin là xem thế sự thế mà phá cả cái ra đến đi xem xem là mà tôi bảo là tăng nhỉ mình là stand đi sự ra đấy chỉ ta chơi chơi sum xem tăng sự đó rồi mấy lần xem bên trong xem đó sum bút thế sự ra xem là tôi bảo mấy bạn dùng cái nó sự đó nên sum bút tên trên trong đó xem mình thùng bảo rong mà như sum bút tên trên để bảo trong đó ba sự ra nên xem đó mình thùng bảo mấy ta mình thùng bảo trên xem là tôi mình có bảo rong tôi trên dùng để thế mà để xem ra cái đó sum bút tên trên trong đó xem mình thùng bảo rong mà như tên để nhưng mà đó xem là tôi trên để này dùng mà như để thế mà để xem ra rong mà như te karsido sa te dar chöjin jungwa sum se shanla teba meba rangi ngoyo yoba mimbar tha se jungwa shanda daga de shanla teba meba ba rangi ngoyo yoba mara meti mikse ta songa pa sha se o tende ma re se ra ma mimbar tha ane karsido shan sum tenjin rebaran jungwa te sumbu te tenjin rebaran jungwa ra ba so ra chö meten bande runga ma ore shanda meti tenjin rebaran jungwa yinba che shanda teba che sumbude shanla tö me goya che tende metimba teta metimba jungwa te regi ma re che shanla tö be che se war tanda shanda sumbude ya chudar wa lungda tesu sama shenla to kore se. Tenzin Bhuchung da chu mitimba ko shenla to jin dewa ma re se. Ro meda dag ma re se. Ane ti meda mitimba tenzin dewa ma imba te da mitimba chen yoba te te ma re se ora. Mitimba dia rungwa minbe chir se ora. Karesne shenla to bare konzo shenla to bare. Shenla ma to ne rawan chen chungge chiga yo ma re jiden ka ngo ko ra. O teach it na digdo.
Mm.
Yeah.
So then next, turning to verse 87, here the kind of realists keep pushing, sort of saying like, well, it's known in the world, it's well renowned that fire is dependent upon fuel. So, okay, fire is contingent on something, but the other three are still independent or have like are established by their own nature. So here it reads then, if you claim that only fire is well known to depend on fuel, like is well known within the world to be something that is contingent on others, then according to you, how could the other three be independent? So here they'll say, well, it is the case that, okay, fire is dependent upon fuel, and that's well known in the world, but the rest of them, the other three elements of water, earth, and wind, are not dependent upon anything. They have their own essence. Well, that doesn't make sense to say because it does not make sense for those three to be incompatible with what is interdependently arisen. So if you wanted to say that, well, no, these other elements of water, earth, and wind are not contingent, they exist from their own side. And so the response to that is, well, it's not viable, it's not logical or tenable for these three to be uncontingent, not dependent upon anything else, yet still somehow be able to be compatible with fire. So here it says, like it would follow that the three other elements that you assert to be non-contingent would not exist from their own essence, from their own nature, because it's not the case that it's not suitable for them to be phenomena that are not compatible with something that is interdependently arisen. They too are dependent upon other things. So all of the elements, not just fire, are contingent on others. And so to say that these three are not is not logical with the way of the world. Anything that exists within the world has this kind of dependency or contingency. And so it's not possible to argue, or it doesn't make sense to say that those three could be incompatible with what is interdependently arisen, as in they have some sort of existence by means of their own nature. They too are contingent phenomena.
Oh yeah. Don't do that. Kasura. Getting Joanna Penza Tejas, Taco. No more Kari Lamna, Tea, Digmar Spark Kagi ora. That on the Karsi was on Joan Shiga, Shalato the Kudos, Turnaya, Shalato the Rawanto use against each other. Shalato Naya Rawanto Yun, Rawanto man, and Meva Chandora. Rawin Zuzu such man and Meva Chandra, Machina. Oh, Tisonda. Oh, Joan somebody shall not touch in any of those. You know, around when years, around Shinji years and Asigora. That till Lenkagora. Getting Joanna Penjutene, ranking Moyo Doshina, Penjutuba, ranking Moyo Yins and Asigora. Oh, Tidigma is Tibacagdoa. Tikandis Cagdosina. Joanta da Chitabuna Penjutune, Yabat in Metevarta, so ranking Moyo Yabe Sigora. Rawanto Yona shall to Marisora. Rawanto Yona. Nangaranga Yusera, Pumbudan, Sobudan, Semda Soadan, Tezuke, Newang Jurjari, Tandal, Sonasiguda, Naise, Nati, Wang Jurabutabo, Pumbula Loso, Narayaves and Sorgoda. So Wang Jurabutabo, Logayora, Tisamgora, Kede, Joanna Pensu Toya, Ranking Oyo do Shenase, and Joanna Teda Pensu Tone Yuba, Mitebartasigora. 소소 랑게 예배체 소소 랑게 예배체 랑원에 랑원에 예배체 랑신게 예배체 랑게 뭐에 예배체와 랑원도 예배체 시거라 어디래. 전다데 가리 뚜거스는 가진 라인 봐. 지 촉발을 때네 내 파다 상게체 마도 데나네 지 주고 주서지라고 말을 안 거네. 라와도 요네 수질 때문에 그 되게 참여도 지요나. 라와데 수질 때문에 그런 장자 주세나. 다수의 풍부한 파샤, 소화 샘파샤, 소부 파샤는 미세지 요나 아니 라와도 주바라. 어디 요 말했을 때 강걸 자주라 찍바라. 발소라. 가도서 그때 중앙 편지 때자 랑게 뭐 요도 신나시고라 소소 랑요 대단해서 소소 랑게 요바 라와도 요바 대단해 지다보나 편지 때세 라와도 요나 랑외네 요나 현달은 때진 될 거면도 랑게 뭐샤 발라 랑게 뭐도 두발이야 샹을 때 거면도 하시고라 소소 랑요 대단해 소소 랑게 요바 라와도 요바 되네세 랑외네 요바 있나 지다보나 편지 가서래 지다보나 편지 여서 편지 떠네 여고야면 도와세 가르치는 편지 떠고야래 그거는 라와도 도와서라 근데 소소 라요 마이바 지다 지다 편지 떠세 어다 소소 랑게 여바 마이나 아니라 지다 지다 편지 떠 소소 랑게 매나 결하잖아 야 라원에 매나 ane kaasa chidar penchi to ne yobadi tegi maari saridwa, chidar penchi to. Tada yunga teda si hoden treba. Yunga teda ne chidabu na penchi to ne yobami tebarta soso rangi yobe chirs. Kedi rangi ngoyo mena se chidabu na rangi ngoyo mena meba chandu ra konzo ina ni penchi to ne yobadi tegi maari sori kena chena. Kedi rangi ngoyo mena teda chidar penchi 또봐 랑게 뭐여 여봐 밑에 버다 랑게 뭐여 여봐 민배셔서 아니 가서래 텐디기도 뭐 어제를 티바도 질렀네 텐디기도 티바도래 대선 자와
Yeah.
그도 안에 되야
No. So here then there's a further sort of qualm that is established or that arises. And so the realists, again, trying to hold on to their position that if something exists, it has to do so inherently or sort of by means of the essence of that thing. And so here they say, okay, well, although the elements are contingent, are mutually dependent in that way, they still each have their own essence, right? They are existent from their own side or inherently from their own side. Because again, for realists, if things lacked that kind of existence, then they think that they would be utterly non-existent. And so here, the kind of refutation of this comes then in verse 88, where it says, if those elements each exists on their own, how could they exist mutually? So again, when we were refuting the self of the person, when we think about the person as being something that is merely designated on the collection of the aggregate, it seems as though there's something that exists like in and of itself, as if there's an I that like has control over my aggregates, that I'm sort of able to control or pull the strings for those. And if it is the case that something has that kind of autonomous existence, independent existence, then it follows that it can't be contingent upon anything else. Again, when we're sort of like searching for the I, it seems like there is something in there that isn't dependent upon those aggregates, as if we pulled each of those away or sort of looked for them within that basis of designation, there would be something in there. Maybe we were able to like push aside all of the aggregates, but point to something. But really, there is no such autonomous existing self that exists in and of itself. So other than merely designating on the basis of a collection of things, then we can't find that thing. Like again, if there were a person, we could go through all of the various elements or the basis of designation and find something to be able to point to. But when you do so, there's nothing that can be found that exists in that way. And so if something is existent inherently by its own nature, from its own side, it doesn't have that kind of contingency or isn't dependent upon anything else. So Here it says, then it follows that if those elements were to exist by their own nature, exist autonomously in that way, then it would follow that it's not logical for them to be contingent in any way because they're each inherently existent. And inherent existence is something that is in contradiction to that. So if they didn't exist, though, by their own essence, for you, that is, for the realist, they would become utterly non-existent. So if they do not exist, if they do not each exist on their own, how could they exist mutually? So again, from the realist position, if they don't have that kind of inherent or existence by their own essence, they couldn't be existent at all and therefore not existent contingently.
Oh yeah. 단데르다 솔로가. 뜻겨구데라. 아니 시 강나르와 시 강나 사다부 도도로 치유나스고라 사치유나세 시 강나 사 강나 여바다부 시 강나 사다부 치여바데 라마스냐 랑긴고요 예세 시 강나 사도도로 치유나 어디나라 추다 추중하다 사이중하 롱기중하다 남게 좋아서 속대도 강가 요래세 냠도 촌이 예세거라 시간을 시간으로 사다부시 여바텔이야 라마 숨랑게 뭐여도세 주라 추다 메다 롱토저 랑게 뭐여레스나 초대 여레스 시거라 대 예배 주제가레스네 대 생이 예배시스 사시 태바지 여러와세 사토도 대여버셔라 아니 그추 뒤샤바 렘바싱게 추 뒤샹게 줘라 렘바지에 맨날 그 소소소 가가 놓으셔라 주제 디버싱 게시여라 다 텔리샤네 저게 차차야 지다 깨야다 된대 요거라 자 대조 강가 사시 태바다 양시 요와다 로와 근데 렌시 셔와 대조 자와데 지도 디버싱 게 개버싱 게 로와 아니 지 요월 저게 된대 생인도 와서 사시 태바다 양시 요와다 로와 근데 가서래 사시 태바시 사시 때 사코라 아마테로와 아니 양시 요때 롱기 중앙 요라 야페와다 저와다 시다 깨투고라 아니 렌시 셰바 요라 투루루체 냐도 요라 대도 현다도 생인도 가서 저날 생이 송부도 사시 태바세세 요와로 어때도 송부도 하세라 대 생이 예배 처리나서 가지고 더버다 뭐마하게 다 가리인데 만나지 예수 시그레서 때 줬던 게 와라 된대잖아 요마 된대잖아 요마랑 원에 주바 남면 매버데 두고 와르데 타까는 봐 된대잖아 요마를 뛰지라 람겨라 하 공개 찍지 하고서는 강가 하고자로 돈이 돈게 근데 줍대 버릇이데 걔나 된대 람난 지금 만데 람난 지금 말으시데 타까는 저를 라떼요라 소소랑게 저라 된다 소소랑게 예체나세 소소랑게 예체나세 아니 가나치 라만남 만데 타케나 가나 사이에서텔레 샨다 사시 그 야시요라 소베 생이데 요사티 랑군데 예시기 나서라 아니 데데베데 다 콘주 만데베체 요르다 데네 소소체네 요레스 티티브라 사도도라 치난 중앙 샨다님도 요세라 다 콘주 데네 요르다 만데베 소소 요스 조티거라 티체 요체나 아니 가서래 강나 사유바 데르 강나 상만 중앙 대주 상마 아니 만데바 찍도 만데바 만데바 남 찍네 메서래 만데비제 대대 요나네 고 찍도 내바데 되게 말해서로 소소소 가가지 되어라 만데바제 요나네 찍도 내세 되게 말해서라 데바 소소 데제 요나네 소소 내바셔야 돼 소소소 가가지 내바데 되게 말해서라 데바 남네 찍네메 로 네 만데바 남 찍네메세 만데나 소소 가가려라 데바데는 소소소 개요마 냠도 데데요라 티시기도 돈 데바들로네 게데 소소 랑 메게 가나 찌여바데를 랑만남 요나세 중화지 유사들 시거라 사다부터 도치서 게데 소소랑 매게세 강나 지여바 데를 하만남 여나 아니 중시 랑신기 여담 다 중화시대 네 중화시 랑신기 데네 여다 다 파트와트 여다 디날야 강가 여슬러와 고도 만데베 여다 데네 여레스 제다 탄다 만데바 여세 다 만데바 여스는 되게 말을 시마 메테세 만데바 여스는 되게 말을 잘아 가르스는 만데바는 유치도 내가 매베세 만데베세 배 가가지 만데베세 여다 유치도 내셔야 돼 되게 말을 하셔라 치도 내서는 kontinamdo 되셔야 그게 차도라 만데바는 유치도 내가 매베세 나만 메테된 데네 여스는 데바 소소 랑게 ngwe yeba membe ches de che yonane soso range ngo rawa chen yong marwa sura kun de ora nyamdo ani soso range ngo rawa chen yong marwa o tinde che ko do ya tichilamna.
So here, continuing then into verse 89, it says then, like beginning with Gyaltsabje's commentary, that if you have something like a clot of earth, like one piece of earth, then there you have this is actually the kind of assertion of some, again, these realists who aren't quite getting it yet, that whatever sort of basis you have, like for example, if you have a clot of earth, each of the elements is there within that because it has all of those characteristics, right? So we have earth in that there's that hardness there, but there's also the kind of cohesion, which means that there's also water within that. And there's a fire in that that has the ability to kind of mature and to bring forth increase in other things. And there is the ability for that to move, the kind of motility element. So here, if you have something where in a single clot of earth, you have all of the elements present because of the fact that all of their characteristics are there. We can see the kinds of characteristics that they have. Well, then how is it that they exist? So here, I'll read the verse, and it says, if each does not exist on its own, but wherever there is one, the remaining three are present. If not mixed, they cannot be present in one locus, and if mixed, they cannot each exist on their own. So here, the interlocutor is actually trying to say that each of those, like when you have something again, where you have like a piece of earth, that has within it all four of the elements. It's not just purely the earth element, because it contains the kind of potential, or it has the characteristics of all of the elements, in the sense that there's the kind of hardness and obstructiveness of earth, but then also the kind of cohesion, the holding together that comes from the water element, the capacity to mature or to ripen, to age things that has the fire element, as well as the sort of motility that comes through the earth element. And so here, again, with the way we're going through these various refutations, for somebody who has had a proper like realization of emptiness, or who has understood that on some level, they don't need to go through each of these. But for someone like the realists that are really holding on to these kinds of views, this is breaking them down in various different ways. So here, if it is the case that these individually don't sort of exist on their own, but when you have one, the other three are present there, well then how is it that those four elements exist together in that one place? Is it somehow that they are mixed, that their natures are mixed together, or is it the case that they have, or that they're not mixed? And so the first of those propositions that is addressed in the commentary is that, well, if they exist in a single place, if you want to assert that they are present in a single place in a way that is not mixed, well, then that's not logical, because how can they be all in one locus if they don't, if they're not mixed together? You would only be able to assert that there would be one there. But if it is the case that you want to assert that they are mixed together, well, then how could it possibly be be if they are mixed together, that they have their existence by their own essence, by their own nature. Well, then that isn't possible either. So if mixed, they cannot each exist on their own. And if they are not mixed, but you're trying to assert that wherever one is, the other three are present because their characteristics are present, it's not possible for them to be present in one locus if they aren't mixed together.
야, 다 국주들이야, 솔가 국주들이야. 다 가시도서나 소소 라멘 종아 남시라. 소소 라멘에 매나 종아 남게 소소 생이 사시 대바다 야시 요하다 레시 쇼하다. 어때도 생이지 라멘에 요버 대고 말이셔라. 소소 라멘 종아 남 소소 생이 갈아 요서. 다근 소소 생이 사시 대발을 써봐 대주 손도 와서 라멘에 요구를 쓰러워 다들 발라고라. 종아 코라 라멘에 매나 사시 대바 야시 요할 제 생이 두저랑군에 용 말했어요. 봐 갖고치거라. 소소람에 용안남 소소랑세 갈아요. 랑 생이 갈아요서 사시테발을 써봐. 소소람에 셰셰하면서 셰치중 요아데 겸해서 나한테 용 셰치중도 온 거라고 연애 가서는 소소람에 셰셰하면 생이 단에 군두셔. 근데 저 가서 사이 생이 다 초다 매다 롱기 중에 생이 셰도 와서 대단 계획도 와서 나와도 생이 셰바데 군수 교환도 전에 셰로 마다 견안에 시던 담바여 바랑은에 여바 담바여 바텐데 완도 전에 셰요 말에세 단위에 좀도 군수도 생이 여름마다 더 담바텐데 요 말에세 티셰도 나한테 제번데라 소소랑게 생이 랑게 뭐에 갈려도 매바다 생이 사시 대바데 생이 랑게 뭐 여러 셰라 되요 말에서 그라 가르스는 중앙은 소소 라시면 중앙은 사랑은에 매나 사이 생이 랑은에 두바 가요 용 말에서라 어야 제장 셰주 냠도 제네 요 이나 콘 제네 요나야 셰치 중요라 qabri 사이 중앙 셰셰 qabri 메이 중앙 셰셰 qabri 롱기 중앙 셰셰네 데 뭐 준도 그래서 나시거라 데 셰치 중에 배찬에 랑은에 요 두두 말에서라 이거 원래서 셰치 중에 생이 셰치 중 메베 셰르 셰나세 대연아 셰치 중에 삼제 랑은에 요 데 두두 말세 뒤베 생이 네 셰치 중다 냠도 되네 요나 이나 코 벤제제 대요 말고 그 숙치 중 요래 매숙체네 메레도 롱셰체네 롱레도라 셰체와레 도스나 아니 가서도 뭐 랑게 뭐 투바메나 랑게 뭐 랑군에 투바메벌이야 아니 소소 생이 랑군에 투바 용 말해서 그라 소소 때문에도 매베셔세 근데 원나 가서 뭐베 돌레네 중에 생이 셰도 같이 마디르베스나 어디 타니 군족게 와도 전에 셰그마도 계란 되버나시 랑군에 여바도 담바 여베 생이 더 담바 여바다 랑군에 여베 와도 전에 셰그 말해서래 중앙남제 생이 군족도 여봐 민점 다점 타니점도 셰게 랑게 뭐여 두바 네베시 단데 우마벨로나 시소라 저그날 셰버데 티셰데 우마바나 시잖아 타니도 군족도 여봐 삼레 마도 랑원에 두베 더 담바 두베 사주 멜로고 중에 생이디 셰게 말해셔라 티슬라는
So then turning to verse 90, it says here, how can elements that do not exist on their own have inherent characteristics? And when mixed, one element cannot predominate since it does not exist on its own. Hence, their characteristics are stated conventionally. So here, again, the realist would want to say that there's, well, how can you assert if these elements do not individually exist from their own side, then how can they have characteristics? How do they have various characters that we can observe and we can see? And so they want to assert that even though these individual elements might not have their own sort of existence, independent existence or existence by their own essence, that they do have their definitions or their characteristics then exist by their own essence, by their own nature. And the answer to that is that, well, no, that's not possible. If the thing that is characterized doesn't have that kind of existence by means of its own essence, then how could its characteristics have that kind of existence by means of their own essence? And they also want to assert that, well, when these elements are mixed together, it's not as though they're fully mixed, but there's one that will predominate over the others. And therefore, you would say like, oh, that's fire because the fire element is predominating, or oh, that's water because the water element predominates. So here, as the first question raises, they want to turn to the Abhidharma and say, well, it says in the Abhidharma, for example, that water has such and such characteristics, such a nature, and fire has such a nature, and so forth. And so this is contradicting that, for you to say that there is no character of these various elements. Well, here, as they are trying to assert that such a character would be an ultimate kind of nature, this is not asserted by particularly the Prasangikas, that none of these have existence by means of their own essence or autonomously, independently, and nor do their characteristics exist in that way, but are merely conventionally existent, are merely sort of names that are given to these various phenomena and their characters, but not something that exists in and of their own right. And so here it continues by expressing that like even also for the kind of situation where you would want to assert that they are mixed together in the sense that they gather together and one kind of character predominates, well, it would follow then that there is no like truly existent, nothing that is actually established, because there is nothing that has that kind of autonomous existence without being contingent. And so again, they raise this issue of, well, if it is the case that for example, the Abhidharma gives these definitions or the kinds of characters of the various elements, then does not saying that they lack inherent existence contradict that? And it isn't a contradiction here, because it is the case that these are only merely conventional, mere names, mere symbols or labels that are given, but none of these have that kind of existence by their own essence.
야, 근데 소아스. 단데 당하죠. 단데 중앙에서 라신 주마도 셰사라. 단 중조르데서 라신마도 대다 총바레세. 수타티로레 차토스 시바란 중조르세라. 사추 멜롱게 중앙에 때는 고충와 수단 중앙에 주르와서 중조르세가라. 대저 단데 나신 사추 멜롱 중앙에 둘이 자라 나신 차제 디로레 잘라 소바 대절에 직바차네 심바치 있어거라. 다 도나여베네 다데 베체체 따고로 담만네 신치자. 야 이제다. 된 종교를 신지 주바 가봐서는 중화다 송바. 어딘데 다 가도 뒤로 렉바다 하셔라. 수다라다 가도서 수도라 수다 제다 로다 렉샬 송바다. 대달라 신데 예선 중화라 셰베 취데다 송바랑 위네 주바 매버에서라. tenete gare senam. Deta koshita jure. Kato tiru rekpa kanyi ba teta ja rangshinki mebar thal sora. Ene teta lana junga rangshinki truban gokbe tsuyin dita chani chikba cheche shimba chi isagwara. Junga sum tayiga ta chara rangshinki shimba chi isa. Kasere. Susu regme tasu kato la soba. Tiro rekchala soba de chani nyamdo yorta. Sony orta, Kagachani orta, Dreni orta, the Chagurta, Dibuche. Chiso Chawar Chawose. Sumba Rashitu. Tamboni, ya teach lamna.
So then turning to the next verse, above we've been establishing that the elements lack inherent existence or existence from their own side. And so too are those things that are derived from or evolved from the various elements, those derivatives, what comes from the elements, including, as it says here, colors, odors, tastes, tactile objects, and so forth. Those too are also not inherently existent. And so by extending the same kind of logic, and here looking at the text, for those who really want to do that, have an inclination as such, can look at these kinds of reasons that are put forth, and they equally apply to that which is derived from the various elements. So here it says, this approach also applies to colors, odors, tastes, and tactile objects. So not only is it the case that we can use the same kind of, like, these are equally, the same logic equally applies both to those elements itself, looking at how they couldn't exist individually by means of their own natures or mixed together or in this kind of contingent way. So too, we can apply this to the things that are derived from them, the various types of form, shape and color, and looking at that and so forth. One can equally establish, using the same kind of logic, that these also lack inherent existence.
Oh, yeah. 그래서 다 최신 탐제를 봐자야라 된다. 까마드네 시 최상말 봐자야 시 심바치서 거라. 아야 전에 간도스네. somba 최 탐제 시할라 자네 심바차고라. 될어서 미당 스타치 거라. 유당 다 유전 미 왕보전 미게 왕보 나가면 미게 시바 나가 시바 내시바 최 탐제를 봐자고 그래서 미당 남시 수남당세. 미와를 써봐 미그 남시대 수유 수라 써봐 다 유다 왕부다 유신 가가 잔심셔 마릭바다세 마릭바다 레다 tellatene 껴래 텐데 양라 종이를 써봐 강가를 저를 자니 심셔라 저는 제바보다 레 때sol에 자니 심셔 제바다 자와 또 당지니 숨실라 써봐 된다 교단 제부다네 봐 ane tondo da rinpo sara, chenpo da chungjo sara. Lidwas, tong da rin so, shesha da, ane ming da ming jen, ming jen ki su, ming su shibe, ming la so ba, te zo, rang shin ki me wara. Ming da ming jen, ti shin no sa. Te zo tamal ba rin da ne shimba cha wara. Me da nambar sheba da, su nam da, ma rik ba da, 이번 두지 레다 깨와라 소바 강가 차라 그다 레다 자와다 지다 니 숨싱을 당다 펜주 트레벤 뎀바세로 세진리아 발란다 뎀바레 소보다 뎀바레세 덴주트리 셰요라 지질 뎀바 어테조 지바레 근데다 교단 제보다 드 데바 마오바타다 세라 아니 이르기 튜바 통어 입세라 내가 링동 통어 첨부세라 링부다세 아니 소베 주신 동부다 가도 입을서 강가자래 주신 동부 시샤와다 너보다 저지 네발라 소바세 요 너보 생기 tension 네발라 소바 명다 명제 다 명제 명강라 주사가 시티서라 중앙라 따내서 어디 정말로 딱제셔네 다신도 준비 주바 대신노서 다다 중앙라 소바 준비 주바 나절에 나와대 랑원에 주바 랑신기바 난기 와라 대난시 템바 많이 봐 준비 주바 뒤나와대 준비 봐 나와네 신메템바들 준비 주바래 템바 주바 말에 나절에 나주나시 랑원에 주바 랑신기 주바 랑도 주바 타고 예바테 나와네 시 주요 말레스 자꾸 준비 주바레스 당당바 주바 말레스 아니 그래서 준비 주바 이노세 디바도 지르 야 어디다
So, similarly, this should be applied to all phenomena, really. So, here, applying this to other things as well, it continues in the second half of verse 91, saying, such is also the case with the I faculty, consciousness, and visible forms, ignorance, karma, and birth. So here, this should be applied equally to all phenomena, really. We have our sense powers that then give rise to our various sense consciousnesses, which in turn take the objects, which are various derivatives of the elements. And so too, when it comes to all phenomena, really going beyond just those things as well, to agents, objects, actions, number conjunction in the sense of having a kind of possession, cause and effect, time, long and short, and so on, designation and designated as well. So here, when it comes to all a manner of phenomena, so everything from the various eyes and consciousness and forms and so forth, through it lists here the 12 links of dependent origination, beginning with, or some of them, beginning with ignorance, karma, and birth, and so forth, as well as actions, actors, the acts that they do, those as well, the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, the kind of possession, which comes from the sort of coming together of things, the meeting of things. But again, we can think of this in the sense of like Devadatta has a cow or Devadatta has a body, that sort of possession of something. As well, cause and effect, things like time, as well as all that is included within forms. We could have like long and short, big and small, round and square, and so forth. The functionality of phenomena as well. All of these things which are included in that which is designated and the things so designated. This, in the way that one examined the elements, so too one should see this, one should establish that these are false, like the self. So here, this is again, in that the phenomena appear to us to have this kind of existence in and of themselves, in their own right, but really they aren't established from their own side. So they appear that way, but ultimately they don't exist in that way. So as it says here, this approach, so this should be understood in relation to all of these various phenomena that are listed out. And here in the commentary, it says that they should be established as false, as in they exist in a way that they appear in a way in which they don't actually exist. They appear to have that kind of existence in and of themselves, but when we examine them, like the kind of examination that was done of the elements, we can establish that they are false, just like the self.
Oh yeah. Well, that didn't much. The much because I do share some but then do it. The Keshikaramanda Karichone, Tombani said, Don't that the name of Chawara. When a Madu, Ranshi Madu said, Chashel turn, Chitson, and a telepa Mingitan, teaches a race shower mado. Tiwanga Shagwa some give much in Bachet, wrong when a unit and a Kagran dear and dear and dear said, say you are a Tauton Jessica. Tinye Yomara, Timete, Chokwa and Chasha Conlet and Ye Yomara. Kolpa Minjita said the contrary Chawacheba, take a Chawacheba Shaguyora. Tenzin Debar Joala Chachi Roma Sigora. Oh, take a Sinshasarimba, take Niena Dina said, took the Takane, Tashakane, the Dechana Labunan Dima, Dechana Dima Recadero. She had the chief Shan and the Conquer Sajura. Chidar Kujitag and Doshin Shebat, Shekuna Lo Charcha. Chicken like motions on Kangachibada. Oh, that on the Nazu de Karshe Sena. Che Tamja Ranshiji Meba take it to Adinama. Ranshiji Meba to send to the Shagadoa. Oh, that is better. That on Buddha. Sada Chuda Meda Long. Rendon Tada Pumia that others do. Rabbe want to say, and I could Chijun to the Purita Suri to the Purilla the Surisha, Surilla to the Parishara. Yan Pajo the Pandona, I could Suri, Pajo de Marazo de Sadi Suri Richuna. 콘주 대세대 버리러 버리 땡게도 콘주 대세대 처리를 가지고 버리러 그치 이제 떠는 샤네 타냐다가 리버적으로 마도 버리서도 타직도랑 원에 주바치네 그 버리 장장마도 수리다치다래로 지금 알아 던지된게 타냐게 온게 사서도 당하는 시 지중이나 질러도데 충주래 야고 전달도데 전부 차거든 또 이제 렌데서라 라바라고 전해라 어때네 다다 신세로 간가 버리소리 지신 중에서보다 어때나시 저 강가 명다사지 따마도 속바 망보치 전에 대주 자와치부 들려 자와진게 샤워로마도 띵하라 중간에 유정원에 지도 삼그로 다시도 그면 가져이나 자인버리지 나와도 이 동안에는 이 고난원에 이 동안에 소소섬기 봐 따기 여봐 답시당 차셔를 때는 메테 두자야서 봐 따기 와라 라와도 그랑 원에서 자인버지 주서 네게 요 말을 답시질에 소소 깨지셔다 말이 지 말이나 그 엄미야 오면듯이 다셔 마도 이건데 랑은의 주변 이도면 와시는 상막에 이도면 와 통거라 랑은의 주변 이도면 이 어디 와시는 상막에 야부시비 통거리 통거 말해 가셔 야부 통거리 가셔 도 통거라 이 랑은의 그쪽이요 말 어디 간걸 봐 잘심 버셔라 님버셔 당한저 내려서 그말에서 99소디면도 뭐야 야 다니면서 추다 매당 롱 안에 링동 타다 봄이다 안에 가도 계속 개맥을 롱마다 좀 그와 남시 가발 주시 두개 송시 어디래도 근데 저기도 사슈 멜로 링동 타 봄이를 써봐서 강가대에서 거라 안에서 니네 남시에서 박배 냠샤에서 동반이 무슨도 세그도 세거라 대응을 안에 대랑원에 연에 대도 세고라 그 팀주도 마스네 팀부들에 대와라 그 딱제 전에 뒤쳐는 어디면도 딘도스야 저데 박배 냠샤에서 당분 아주 태바체 때네 랑원에 연에 니고라 가와도스 말에 때문에도 때네 딱 와서네 때네 삼삼 랑원에 동바도 공고도 무슨도 떠오르라 박배 냠샤에서 무슨도 식도 다랑원에 여보 연에 대도 세고래서 와라 대도 동바지 마도 저바 간가 세게요 말해 연아 분바 수랑원에 연아서 제주단 거라 수랑원에 만제도 수 동바 세거라 랑원에 두바 세거라 지대 타녀 수도 세거 말해 타녀서 타녀 딱 보자면 저기서 쫓아라 그거는 리블 나가라 다 랑원에 연아서 뒤째기와라 뒤째는 거 숨도 세대 저바 사만 가도래 뒤도 속 매배 된다 말해 타녀도 예배 뒤 깨지 말아 랑원에 연아서 다 가와요 세대 내 동바 박배냠샤식이 유도 이 속지 차야 연아 다 소랑원에 줘버려 거라 랑원에 줘버려 세지 땅게 얼마도 저기 타녀 잠도 딱 보자면 세지 땅게 말아 뒤 남샤식이 말아 어디 인도 가서라 어디 시기 왔다 사단 추다 매단 롱 ren동 토마 안에 가서라 봄이다 안에 계속 개매기 롱마다 좀 쳐가게 되나 도라 민 남시에서 또 가가 마부티나 되루다 가발 교시 투베 송세 어디 가서도서나 사단 추다 매단 롱다 ren동 다 차단 봄이다 개매기 롱마다 니 추대도 삼제 추전세라 랑신지 두바 매대세라 봄니소세 랑신지 두바 매대 랑신지 두바 여나 박배냠샤 이시기 시고발레 네 와 시고바 강시 남시수 대생을 가바라 주라 투베서 뭐요 대생구나 요 말은 가서로 정말 동소래다 관계 대지 좀 가봐 매번 매번 제발 매번 땅 하면 다들 저반이 시에서도 어디서 정말 동돌다 시도 그기도 어디 줄람나 꾸죽꾸승대라
So, here, then looking at verse 93, here, It's then teaching again, all of these phenomena are to be understood as being empty of inherent existence. So all of these like examples are given above, all of this kind of logic and refutation. And again, it's mostly to refute the kinds of views that are held by, say, the realists. Whereas if you have a good understanding of one phenomenon's emptiness, you can then apply that in the same way that you understand like the lack of a self of a person, you apply that to all other phenomena. And so here, this is really getting at that phenomena lack that kind of existence from their own side in and of themselves, but are rather dependent designations that on a collection of parts, you designate, oh, this is this, give it a label. And if you're not satisfied with that, if that doesn't satisfy you and you search beyond that, you're looking for something, again, that exists in and of itself. This process of investigation is really getting at the unfindability of that. So here, when it says then in verse 93, the sage has stated that earth, water, fire, and wind, short and long, thick and thin, virtue, and so on, cease in the awareness of the ultimate. So here, all of these kinds of phenomena, again, that which we've gone through the kind of logic and reasoning of the elements, as well as things like short and long, thick and thin. Here, if we think about these kinds of contingently made designations, like from my perspective, I can say, well, I'm on this mountain over here, and that mountain is over there. But when you change perspectives, I mean, from the people who are over there, that mountain that they are on is the mountain over here, and the mountain that you are on is the mountain over there. And so too, when we think about things like thick and thin or long and short, it's really only in relation to something else, in dependence upon a collection of parts, that we make a designation. Oh, this is short in comparison to that other thing, and so forth. And so too, when it comes to self and other, all of these phenomena are really designated, dependently designated, although they appear to us to have the kind of existence where they exist in and of themselves, in their own right. But if it were really the case that, say, the person that we see as being our enemy, or the thing that we see as being pleasant, existed in and of itself in that way, then it would have to be the case that at all times and for all people, that enemy would appear as an enemy because they are existent in and of themselves, in their own right. But we can see in our experience that that isn't the way that it is. People aren't always our friends or always our enemy. Maybe they do something that really irritates us or say something a little bit wrong, and all of a sudden our perception of that person changes. We could have been viewing them as quite pleasant, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that is my enemy. And so if it were the case that phenomena had that kind of existence, which they appear to us to have, that like is in and of themselves, in their own right, there are many different sort of terms or labels that are given to this, but it would have to be seen in the perspective of an Arya's meditative equipoise. When one has studied emptiness, as in first learned about it, heard about it, and then done the kind of logic and analysis to come to some kind of an understanding, and then meditates on that, at some point it becomes a direct realization of emptiness. And if there were some kind of phenomena that had that existence in and of itself, by its own essence, it would have to be visible, or sort of, it would have to be realized within the context of that meditative equipoise. And so again, for many, they want to think that they do, due to their tenets, assert that there needs to be some kind of existence in and of itself from its own side. Then they're not satisfied with phenomena being just designated. Well, it would have to be the case that such phenomena would appear to the meditative equipoise of an Arya in that direct realization of emptiness. If form had that kind of existence in and of itself, it would have to appear to that meditative equipoise. But this is not the case. When we look at any of these phenomena, they are merely dependent designations, but don't have that kind of existence in and of themselves. So again, as we see in like the homage in Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, in which he talks talks about the Buddha's teachings as being the kind of stilling of all thought, the stilling of those kinds of conceptual elaborations. And he talks about not coming, not going, not annihilated, not permanent, and so forth. All of that is in reference to the perspective of an Arya's meditative equipoise, and the fact that this kind of existence doesn't appear to it means that such ultimately such phenomena do not exist.
Oh yeah. 다 굽죽굽시더라. 아니 셰바 소리 담아도 땜바 치버시라. 난다 동반이 고시거라. 셰바. 전에 가서. 남시 때문에 타야 봐서도 남시 때문에 타야 봐. 군도 딱 보텔라니. 사다 추다 매다네. 롱게 네 요르마에 네 요마에 매도. 야, 제바드 말론데 지금. 메토베 시 소소랑게 리버차와스. 남시에서도 메토베 넘버 테코는 메토베 파고 냠샤시게 동반이 무슨도 동게 이시들 송겨라. 넘버 메토베 시에서 메토베 남시 소소랑게 리버차 소소랑게 리버서 무슨도 리버드 시고라. 든지 수기를 봐 똑바도 전에 든지 수기를 봐서 소소 섬리아치 차쇼 나와차 대규내는 돈다도 섬을 당겨와라 든지 규내 그 규배 권에라 이 소소랑 무슨도 어디를 받을수 와라 소소라 그랬어야 돼 든지 매라 다 코랑 무슨 미기십에 돈을 세버치시거든 그러니까 남시 거기서도 그래 메토베 이시 소소랑게 리버샤와세 그래서 남시에시잖아. 샹란데오시 텐도 매바스. 당가 건조 그 냠샤가 시번은 생각줄이야. 만데버지 땡 요마로 아주 지템베네 든지 균이 땡고라. 마도 좀 무슨도 시번은 생각줄 통도 마도. 수수 검데 지만 무슨도 또서는 통기를 마도. 누가래. 샹란데오시 텐도 매바 시자 타예베 내루라 왕규레 군도 다보신데 담아이게 남시 떼미스 나라즈 고고 식반의 생각을 텐도 매바 라 타예바스 군도 다보텔라네스 티셰기도 내루라 왕규레 군도 다보 내루 터투데다 강 공게 식반의 신 무슨도 식반의 신 어디 내루데 인고요라 사티 타보스텔라 왕규로 안시거라 네로 라 왕규로 군도 타보 텔라네스 군도 타보 텔라네 사다 추다 메다네 롱게 네 토비요마요 어디 늘이야 사주멜론라 소바 대속에 네 토비에게 고급요 말에서 와 저도 요 말로 저번에 와신도라 다 띵올래 네 내기요나네 랑문에 투바데도 랑문에 투마도 세체 땅다 땅네 다 터도 심지어도 마서 다 쟁게 되래서래 그래도서 되오시 따도 시자 타예베 내루라 왕주로에 군도 따보 텔라네세 바베 냠샤시 시제 텔라네 추젠스 띵오나 티추젠스오라 사다 추다 메다 롱게 최제 싱우테르 네 톱고 말해세 네, 톱 말해서 이 따와도 그래서 말이면 단디래. 네, 톱은 유로와 마인바르탈 중세기 마시베서 법anyam샤시게 수다대로를 잘라서 뭐 중세기 마시베서 다 건조랑은에 연에 때도 이게 네 톱고로 알레고로 여다세 저런 제주다 따다르가 대 여다스랑은에 요거라 네 톱고로 톱고 말해서 어디서 야 디스도나
So then the next verse then here is 94, and this is kind of an explanation that comes along with what was demonstrated above, that all phenomena lack inherent existence. So here in 94 it reads, Earth, water, fire, and wind cannot find any place to exist in that undemonstrable, limitless, fully sovereign awareness. So here, this is referring to the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. So here, if it were the case that these phenomena had that kind of existence in and of themselves in their own right, they would have to appear to this. But this is not the case. So here, where it says in that that undemonstrable, limitless, fully sovereign awareness. This kind of awareness is non-conceptual, and it is sort of arisen by its own power, we could say, in that this is referring to its being a direct realization, not having to depend upon a mental image. So when we first have a kind of understanding of emptiness, we familiarize ourselves with that mental image until at a certain point it becomes a direct realization. So here, this kind of non-conceptual awareness is known in a way that is like by its own power, sort of its own volition, we could say. Sometimes this is translated as the wisdom of individual investigation, but it's really that it's coming from its own side, that they have the ability to see these things directly in a way that someone who has not developed that kind of meditation doesn't see. And this is something that is undemonstrable in the sense that no one else needs to say like or show you, oh, this is what this is. An Arya who has developed this kind of meditative equipoise is able to have a realization of the nature of phenomena without having anything sort of demonstrated or shown to them. And in the way that it is able to understand the mode of abiding of infinite objects of knowledge, it is also like completely sovereign in the sense that one has control over that kind of realization. This, again, is related to the kind of search that one engages in, trying to find that thing that exists in the way that it appears to us. So here, as it says in this verse, then that for one who has that kind of a fully sovereign awareness that is undemonstrable and limitless, for them, these things such as earth, water, fire, wind, they don't have any sort of way to abide in the perspective of that meditative equipoise. And this is because this kind of meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness, is not seeing those kinds of phenomena that exist by their own essence at all. If such things did have that kind of existence, then it would have to appear. They would have to be seen by such a meditative equipoise. But as those kinds of conventional phenomena they aren't able to obtain any sort of space within that awareness, cannot find any place to exist in that undemonstrable, limitless, and fully sovereign awareness.
Oh yeah. 다 kubju konga de ra, sologa kubju konga de. Oh, dene ring dang tongwa da. Trabum ke da mege da. Dene ming da so da ja. Malu pa ne gakbar yorusha. Da shecha samal chan sigora. Kar sigora sana. Phabe nyamsha ge singu tene sigora. Dene se sdwa. Phabe nyamsha ye ge singu tene se. Ring dang tongwa da bomba la sabo te so samal tam jen gakbar yorese. Teyo marese. Ne tubyo marese ora. Khobe nyamsha ji singu tene ring da thonga da chawa da bomba da o tene ke me ke loma da la soba te ta thamje ja ro ane malu ba ne ga bar yurse ta de ma re se chi ta ne yo ma re ka re se le ro dine ring da thonga da cha da bom so ke me ki ta ro ane de ne me da su da ja malu ba ne ga bar yurse ta tong bar yurse te zo ka ga ne ge ma re se shin du re se to da shi wa to ba ni war shi se da ra 가르스네 코 랑군에 트베 수디 예마이 딱제 당기와라 랑군에 트베 수디 티티 박바냠샤게 생우나 예나 아니 랑군에 트바데 넬루타두레도 그래 랑군에 트바레다 마두바레 짜제 당기와라 데 랑군에 똥바에네 아니 그 랑군에 트베 수데 마로 아나 걔네 수디 데바에네 아니 수디 랑군에 트바데 넬루타두레도 그래 야나 랑원에 매버든 내로 타도래 야나 랑원에 여버든 내로 타도래 어때 손자 Pogbe nyamsha shi ge ngolia ta de se ne su de ka ge imba kansa de ka ge imba se se ji tang yo ra ti de zo de re se chi ni ra so na rang ne tru be kansa de ne lu ta du re kim me mara de ta me na tong ba se du rang ne tong ba de ne lu ta du re do ra o ti se go ra o ya pogbe nyamsha ge se ngo de ne dene se dene ring da thong da tha da bom da ke me ki da ro ane dene su da tala so ba sama malu ba ne ga bar jo ro se ke so da malu ba ga bar jo de se ra shin ge tong de se ra ngo ne tu ba tong de ra shin ge tum na ne lu ge tong do jo la ra shin ge tum na ta ko ye go re ti de pa ba nyam sha shi ge tu ye ko ra ane nyam sha ge shi ko ba le 냠샤게 시크베치 고 랑은에 여나 랑은에 여 마이 따제 당게 타르투베 시디 시고라 김마시고레세 계속다 랑은에 똥바데 시고라 데데도 야 데바도 시고나 데데소
So then, turning to verse 95, it says, short and long, subtle and coarse, virtue and non virtue, also name and form, all cease in this awareness. So here, applying this to all knowable phenomena, in that for this kind of wisdom, realizing emptiness, realizing the ultimate, they're not able to remain within the kind of perspective of that consciousness because they lack that sort of existence from their own side. If it were the case, I mean, you're engaging in this investigation, searching for the mode of abiding of phenomena, and then that comes to this kind of emptiness. If were the case that phenomena had this kind of existence by means of their own power or from their own side, then it would have to be something that is findable. That would be their ultimate mode of abiding. But here, that can't be found. And so, to the perspective of the Arya's meditative equipoise, all of these phenomena, such as long and short, sort of subtle and coarse, virtue and non-virtue, as well as things like name and form and so forth, all of them are ceased. All of them have stopped. Again, like that Nagarjuna verse that describes this as the stilling of all elaborations, or the pacification of all elaborations, conceptual elaborations, in reference to emptiness. It is the case that in the perspective of that meditative equipoise, when one has done this kind of investigation, when you don't find that sort of existence, you can't come and find and point to that thing. If you could point to something as existing in the perspective of that meditative equipoise, then there would have to be this kind of existence, inherent existence, or by means of its own essence. But the fact is that that isn't the ultimate mode of abiding of phenomena, because it is unfindable. That is its ultimate nature, is that emptiness. So here, the wisdom which has been investigating the ultimate, because phenomena do not appear to that means that their ultimate mode of abiding is that of emptiness. So if it were the case that they were inherently established, then that would become their ultimate nature, and it would have to be the case that such meditative equipoise would be able to observe them.
Oh yeah. 다 곱주 고주되라. 곱주 고주되. 다들 가르쳐도서나. 메토베 이식이 왔다. 동반이 무슨 또베. 메토베 이식은 뒤째 남네. 뒤째 남 시네. 시네 대 생각봐. 이 남세. 다 같이 쓰어라. 다 박배냠샤 이식되게. 얘는 뒤째 최도 좀 좋아와라 서버 참마데 식샤로 와서 당에만 여부터 봐 매서셔라 하세요라. 식배에서 대생각바로 땅가로라 강가 식샤로 와서라. 근데 리베스나서 어디 말해서라. 어디까지 그 말해서 가서라서는 강 마시에서 남시라. 뭐제 중앙 대권에서 뭐랑은 마주발 마셔로 나랑은 여부 통고 와라. 대치소랑은 마주바 신기 왔다. 마도 식바 말해서 많이 돼서 네 말로 잠깐만. 너네 주변에 신기 껴와매다. 당분이네 랑신지 주베 껴와비요 말에 티 매바데 대가 신간네 랑신지 마주바 임발로 임바데 시바데 시고라 어 강마 시에서 나 마시베 당분이네 고 랑신지 마주바 임바데 마주바데 시바데 시고라 강마 시에서 남세라세 문젠조와 대군해세 문젠조와 대군네 대시치나 당분이네 고 랑신지 마주바 임바데 나라서 트네 랑신지 여바 삼대요도 다시 잡아나시 다시데 당분에 매요 너희네 밀려 경영게 되게 지푸르지마 사용고 삼 통고라 어찌나시래서라 뭐제 좀 대권에 네 대시치나 남시서 대시버라 당분이네 랑원에 마주바데 랑시 매버시버라 마도 당부랑원에 가서 통하는 시 여버시 네 법외냠샤시 그 곰네 티바 매버서 샤르베스네 시바 어디 말해서라 대는 뭐는 지교되는 거라 나를 여버시 때고 매버서 샤라 내일로 통하게를 엄마다. 대권에 대시 지난 남시수 친이 되다 각바리 요르세. 치수 된가는 맵소서 된데 말했어. 근데 저번에 로션 되게. 되도 알세. 근데 식바리 베스는 식니 방가도 베스는 말했어라. 너네 두배랑 신기 껴와매 봐도 당분이네랑 신기 껴와매 봐도 강시 나네 여바테 아니 배나 라브리 장기 따셔 잡고 통도 따셔데 나네 매버 인바레 이나 제마미 당보제 야부차스는 따셔 통고 말아 땡아르 따셔 여바제 따셔데 신이 매버 통하게 말아 되나시래 라브리 장기 따셔 따르 마릭베 팀네 마신바레 나네 여바 통고 알아 친질로제 수수께우 남게 통화인게 라문에 여바 따셔 잡아서 봐 어떤 소식도 통보가 돼서라. 동리도 법에 냠샤이시기 문제 아니 문제 땡진 중앙 랑신기 동바 대구에서 당분이나 랑신기 동바대 식바데 마도 당부 랑신 예바데 식바 말해서라. 내로게 되는데 무슨도 시베치나 남시수대 이 땅마디 천리게 war다. 남시수 친이 되다가 봐 주세요. 남시수대 박배냠샤의 시경으로 신의 대달 각발 교로에서 나네 랑신게 동발라 아니 치 대달 식바인게 당분이네 랑신게 동바데 랑신 동바 식바인게서 나 랑신게 여바데 아니 치수 랑신게 매바 여바데 식네 파매바 시보 말에서 대네 박배냠샤데 뭐wen 지교래도 그래서라 말아서 오늘 여바데 가서 통하는 시템버체 법외냠샤시 공고 공는 가서 통해 임바드 멤버 가서 가가 식사라. 근데 법외냠샤시데 뭐왜 지큐다도 그래서 와라. 어디되나. 이게
So then the next verse is 96. And here someone might have this thought of like, well, if it is the case that this Arya's meditative equipoise does not observe any of these things, all of this ceases, they might have this sense that it is the case that this wisdom somehow like destroys that kind of inherent existence or that existence from its own side. And so here, this is refuted then in verse 96, where it says, all which previously appeared to awareness due to not knowing that reality will likewise cease in awareness because one has come to know that reality. So here it is like when we see in the case of the Nagarjuna homage and talking about the stilling of all elaboration, conceptual elaboration, and there being no coming, no going, no annihilation, no permanence, and so forth, it might seem as though somehow this logic, the implementation of logic, refutes something that was there before, as though this logic and reasoning has the ability to somehow like destroy some kind of inherent existence. But really it is due to not knowing, being unaware, that we impute there to be some kind of inherent existence from its own side, when in reality there is none. Like, so for example, someone who has some kind of eye disease ways in which they falling hairs appear to them, those hairs have never existed, but it is due to that disease that they have the perception of them as such. And so here, from beginningless time, we have imputed upon that which is inherently unarisen to have some kind of inherent existence, in the way that, like, someone who out of their disease perceives there to be falling hairs. And so we haven't recognized this reality due to the obscuration of ignorance. So here, it is the case that for this kind of Arya's meditative equipoise, which realizes emptiness, they are able to then directly see this kind of reality. By generating such an Arya's meditative equipoise, one is able to recognize that kind of nature of phenomena that has been the case from the very beginning. It isn't as though by developing this wisdom realizing emptiness that an Arya somehow destroys a kind of nature or existence that was there before, but rather it is through the direct realization that they gain through this kind of development of wisdom that they are able to refute all of these things within the perspective of that meditative equipoise. So it is the case that, again, this isn't somehow something being destroyed by logic, but a reality that was already there before. So it is the case that from previously, from beginningless time, all phenomena have been empty of inherent existence. And later, when one develops the wisdom of an Arya's meditative equipoise, one realizes that. But it's not as though there's somehow through the seeing of this, there's like a destroying of an inherent existence that was previously there. This is only a coming to see the reality that has been there from the very beginning.
Oh yeah. 다 곱죽곱던데라.
Mm.
곱던데래. 뒤가서도서나. 야. Oh yeah. 남시 매 bü신이 다 남시 단다 밥에 냠샤시 시고라. 어디 bü신 색바나 신게 아니 가서 랑윈에 투발을 써봐 어쩌서 간가데 봐 색네 나외 메버서네 서치고래서라. 아니 드로션 데고 임바르데서 드로션 데고 임바르데서 드로웨초 가서 통대하게 아니 유창마랑윈에 투바 통대해서 간가시고라. 세와르데서 bü신에 색바르데서라. Teta chishin rab jebe ödan dembe sebonesa. Teta chishin rab jebe se. O teta nelu giton chita washington jebe shirab je öje nawe ne mimba nashiti sewar chiba nashi sebare sewara. Ödan dembe sekba nina maluba shivar juwa yinse. Ödan dembe seyne shi se nina maluba shiva yinse adre. Oh, 그만 더 로션에 되라. 내로 제때 식바라. 이제 땅마 되라. 식바이네 아니 법에 냠샤시게 내로 기타 식바 줄거 말해서 진실로 내가 요라. 이 땅마 되다 되어라. 단다 될게. 안드레 최스 로안남제 통대 최 시자다 시바 대군 최진에서 내 공중계 이시 매의 bü신이 받되되 공중계 법에 냠샤시게 색제 bü신에 시들에서라. 말루바네 색베체르사 이시게 나와되게 랑원에 투바데 까두고르도 네루제테 테다 치타와신도 랍돈 제베 외단덴베 색나스타 나웨 멤버세와 나신 텔레 색베 타차로 나웨 멤버세와 나신 나 랑원에 투바 통대게 나와투즈 깡고 파세르레스 니나 말루바시오르요 니나스그라 법베냠샤시테 나도 남기 수다 테르레차 통하나시 통해서 말아 니나스라 유다 유제 타데베 나와시 시바 고란데 동배원 주안에 시바다 동반이 찍바르지 자두고라 니나다 대외 추기세 시바 고란데 동상기 원주라리 통교라 어디서 거라 유이제니 군주 세바네 유이제 타데베 나와시 세고요라 진데 멤버십 어단 덴베 색바데 니나 말루바 시와른 주로세 타마이게도 ödan dembe segne 시세 어 티바도 지교나 된디도
So then turning to verse 97 here, this reads, "It is maintained that all beings and their qualities are fuel for the fire of awareness. Having been incinerated by brilliant true analysis, they are all pacified." So here it is through understanding all of these various objects of our consciousness, as well as our consciousness itself, that they act as like a fuel for the fire of this consciousness, this mind arisen from meditation, the mind that is realizing emptiness. And so it is here by cultivating that kind of wisdom that recognizes the actual nature of phenomena, that those are sort of like the fire that it's how is it described here? Fire, fuel for the fire of awareness. And here again, we're taking these various objects, beings, and their qualities and so forth, and investigating and analyzing them, coming to recognize that they aren't existent in the way that they appear. And again, it's not in the sense of destroying some kind of nature that was there before, but recognizing the lack of such a nature. And so this is asserted to be like a fuel for the fire of this awareness that has risen through meditation, that burns all of these things without exception, that incinerates all of those kinds of concepts or mental objects without exception. And so seeing with a kind of brilliant wisdom, which is able to thoroughly distinguish the way that things are, their ultimate nature, then one pacifies without exception all of the kinds of dualities. Again, using this sort of brilliant fire of wisdom, this radiance of wisdom. So again, in the way that like a light illuminates the darkness, it is through the cultivation of this wisdom that you become illuminated. You sort of burn the fire of those conventional objects and develop this wisdom that lacks duality. So when normal objects appear to us, there's a kind of dualism there, sort of subject and object. But the realizing consciousness, the consciousness which is realizing emptiness here, has really become in the nature of this kind of vivid vacuity, almost in the nature of emptiness itself, such that emptiness is realized in a way that lacks any kind of duality.
Oh, yeah. Oh, kuchukke. I did the kaja. Yeah. And the shashana.
No.
You mother just go so I thought, but that did it. Yeah. Oh,
Okay, so with a little bit of deliberation, we will leave it there for today, as we're so close to finishing this first chapter, but we will leave it till next time.
Oh, that. Yeah. Now I do Cavallo. Could do so. Oh, yeah.
Larry.
Oh, this. Yeah. Oh, this.
Geshe, thank you so much. Thank you very much, Tutuche. And Katrina, thank you so much for your clear translations. We have one more class next week. Please see the chat box for information about how you might make offerings of gratitude for these precious, precious teachings. We'll finish with some dedications.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lapsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
맞아. 리서를. 뭐야, 정말.
두진.
Recording stop.